Namaskar. Welcome to another episode of Editorial. The Hamas attacked Israel, killed children, killed women, men, took 200 hostages. Israel retaliated, killed a lot of innocent civilians, asked people from Gaza to evacuate. The question is, for the last 7, 8, 10 days, we've been talking about who's right, who's wrong, what's right, what's wrong, and so on and so forth. I've got Yoni Leviatan. Yoni is a song composer. He's a musician. He's also a political commentator, and he writes in various newspapers and magazines. So somebody who is aware, somebody who has been following the situation, and somebody who's been writing about it. So let's know from Yoni the Israeli perspective and what he feels about what's going on. That's my show tonight. Let's get right into the show. Yoni, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. Yoni, before I start this interview, let me be very categorical about this, that we condemn what happened in Israel. We condemn the Hamas action, the cowardly action that what Hamas did with those young children, women in Israel. We condemn it. So let's put that straight first, and that's the first thing I want to say. What is your opinion about what is happening currently? People being evacuated from Gaza, people being asked to evacuate from Gaza. Do you think it's right?
Well, first of all, thank you for your strong and clear condemnation. I think it's important to always begin these conversations with that condemnation, because we have to remember that that is how all of this started. War was forced upon us, and unfortunately, war is hell. War is hell for both sides. The whole world saw the hell that Israelis suffered on October 7th. And there's no denying that the Palestinian people are suffering. The displacement that you mentioned is going on both sides. Palestinians have been displaced from their homes in the northern Gaza Strip. They've been asked to move to the south, where it is safer. It is not 100% safe. It is safer than the north, where we know the heavy fighting will be, because that is where Hamas has embedded themselves. And on the Israeli side, we have 300,000 Israelis that have had to evacuate their homes from the north and the south. My family is among those. My family lives, I have cousins on the Lebanese border. They have left their homes. They left their homes on October 8th. They have not been able to go back, but at least they will have homes to go back to. There are many families in the south that don't have homes to go back to. Tens of thousands of Israelis have nowhere else to go now. They are being hosted by the many wonderful people of Israel. The people have come together. There's a lot of solidarity. The mood in the country is a mix of pain, rage, but also a lot of love. And that love extends not, people think that this is, of course, Israel is the world's only Jewish state. I say this over and over again. It is not only a state of Jews. The Jewish people are 75% of the population. The other 25% consists of Arabs, Muslims, Christian, Druze, Bedouins, others, immigrants. There are many people suffering on both sides, and that is the reality of war.
When is this going to stop? How is this going to end? Because according to United Nations, for the last 9 days, not a drop of fuel, not a grain of food has come into Gaza.
Yes, it is. And that is why we have been working with the United States and with Egypt to ensure that humanitarian aid does get into Gaza. There are 20 trucks full of humanitarian aid waiting to cross the border at Rafah in Egypt. This is a border crossing that we do not control, but we have worked to ensure that that aid will go in. We are also working to ensure that that aid does not reach Hamas. This is the reason that we have prevented it since October 7th, because unfortunately, Hamas takes advantage of the international goodwill. They steal this humanitarian aid and they use it for nefarious purposes. And if I could just give you a few examples. The UN has admitted that a few days ago, Hamas stole food, fuel, and medicine from UNRWA, which is the UN organization that provides aid within Gaza. We know for years that aid that has gone into Gaza, such as cement, right? The cement that has gone in order to help the reconstruction of Gaza after previous rounds of fighting, has been stolen and used to build tunnels through which Hamas fighters have a whole underground network of genocidal terrorists that plan and carry out attacks like we saw on October 7th. We know that Hamas stole water pipes that were meant for the people of Gaza, so they have clean water, and they use them to create missiles and rockets that are now fired at Israel day and night for years. So your original question, I believe, was, when will this all end? And I can say categorically, it will end with the elimination of Hamas, because we have had ceasefires before. I understand very well the good intentions of everyone around the world who is calling for a ceasefire. Nobody wants to see more bloodshed. But the problem that we have is, for decades, we've had ceasefires. Every round of fighting ends with a ceasefire, and it begins again within a few years' time. And then more lives are lost on both sides. It is time to put an end to this once and for all. I don't believe there will be a ceasefire until Hamas is eliminated and Gaza is put back into the hands of a responsible entity.
Is it that difficult for Israel to pinpoint Hamas and take down Hamas? Because the reason I ask this is because, according to the UN Relief Work Agency, the food and fuel is just not reaching the Gaza Strip. That's the reason I ask you this question.
Again, it's not reaching it because Hamas is stealing it. So we have to ensure that the aid that goes in does not help Hamas in the brutal attacks against Israelis. You say that we do have capabilities to pinpoint Hamas. We have had, since October 7th, I don't know if the number has crossed into double digits, but we've taken out a number of senior Hamas commanders, and we've taken them out with minimal civilian casualties. So when we can do that, we do. We do have incredible intelligence capabilities. Although, yes, there was a failure of, there's no way to describe the enormous failure, intelligence failure, that allowed October 7th to happen. However, we do still have some of the best intelligence capabilities in the world. And when we can, we eliminate these Hamas leaders with minimal civilian casualties. However, it's important to remember that Hamas embeds itself within the civilian population. And unfortunately, when they launched a war against us, they launched a war within these urban areas. So they're firing rockets at us within urban areas. They have weapons depots stored underneath homes, command and control centers underneath hospitals. It is very, very difficult to get rid of this threat without harming civilians. And we are taking every measure possible. But nobody is perfect. There are going to be civilian casualties, and that is something that the world must accept, because that is an unfortunate reality of war, and there are civilian casualties on both sides. We've already paid a very dear price, and we will continue to pay a price. We are going to pay a price with our soldiers who are risking their lives, not just to save Israeli lives. Our soldiers take risks that most other soldiers in the world do not take in order to minimize Palestinian civilian casualties. Where we draw the line is we are not going to sacrifice our children for theirs. We don't want to hurt Palestinian innocent civilians, and certainly not children. But Hamas has put a formula up that has basically said it's either your children or ours, because they don't want a war for land. They don't want a war for territory. A war for territory ends up like what you see in the West Bank when 5 Arab armies attacked Israel in 1967. And there is a military occupation, a legal military occupation there until today. That is not what Hamas wants. Hamas wants to come into Israel, and they want to slaughter everyone, including me and my family, in the exact same manner as they slaughtered those on October 7th. They don't want to occupy us. They want to behead our babies. They want to torture children in front of parents. They want to torture parents in front of children, and then they want to tie them all together and burn them alive. I'm sorry, this is not something that we can accept. This is why there will be no ceasefire until every single element of Hamas is eliminated. And this is something that will benefit not only Israelis, it will benefit the Palestinian people, because they too have suffered greatly under Hamas.
Attacking a hospital which had large casualties, wasn't it uncalled for?
Yes, totally. And all the evidence shows that we did not attack a hospital. There is mountains of evidence that has been put out and been independently gone through, and it's come to the conclusion that this was a failed rocket launch by Islamic Jihad. And we know this from numerous sources. There are videos from Al Jazeera live in real time, as well as Israel's Channel 12. But we don't ask you to trust everything Israel is saying. I understand there's a healthy amount of skepticism, as there should be for anyone. But we know that this was a failed rocket launch from Hamas. From Islamic Jihad. They launched this rocket from a cemetery close to the hospital. The reason that there was a fire is because the propellant fuel, which is meant for me and my people, it is meant to cause tremendous damage by the time it lands. It didn't have time to go off. So when it actually fell short and landed on the hospital, that is why we saw this big fire. And by the way, the hospital is still standing. It landed in a parking lot. And the initial numbers of 500 dead were preposterous. It's impossible that they could have known how many casualties they were within minutes, when here we are 2 weeks later, we still don't know exactly how many casualties we have. What we do know about that hospital strike is there are dozens of casualties. I believe the European Union, or there was some European organization that put the number at 50. So clearly, what Hamas is putting out, and it's important to remember that the health ministry of Gaza is run by Hamas. So with all the scrutiny given to Israel and the IDF, and it's legitimate, we're a sovereign, democratic country, we should be held up to the highest standards. But my God, that the media around the world, and of course I'm not speaking about you guys, but particularly in the West, many outlets, specifically the New York Times and the BBC, MSNBC and others, they ran with headlines that were given to them by a genocidal terrorist organization, and they didn't do even a modicum of fact-checking. They contributed to the situation. The situation was already on fire. They lit fuel on it, and they exploded the Arab Street. I said this in an earlier interview on another outlet. There was supposed to be a summit when President Biden was here. He was supposed to come to Israel and then go to Jordan and meet with King Abdullah, the president of Egypt, President al-Sisi, President Mahmoud Abbas of the Palestinian Authority, and that could have had a positive outcome. That summit was canceled because of the irresponsible headlines that the media ran without doing any fact-checking, and they took Hamas at their word. So I think it's very important going forward that all media outlets take a breath, wait, don't publish headlines until you've confirmed the facts. And if you're going to publish a story, don't assign blame without evidence. And if you do assign blame without evidence and it turns out that you're wrong, a correction must be issued that is 10 times louder than the original headline, because lives are at stake on both sides.
But then I want to ask you a question. Why do you think that most of the statements that the United Nations relief work agencies have been issuing are things like, for instance, at least 4 lakh people displaced are now in UNRWA schools, buildings. Most of them are not equipped with emergency. All these statements are issued by United Nations. Why are United Nations issuing statements like this?
It's important to understand that UNRWA, the organization that is responsible for Palestinian refugees. And if I could just include a side note, no other refugees in the world have their own organization dedicated simply to them. All the other refugees throughout the world are part of the UN Human Rights Commission of Refugees. I forget the exact acronym. The Palestinians have had their own organization since, I think, 1949. I just wanted to point out that they are staffed by Palestinians. It's not independent international people from throughout the world coming into Gaza. Most of UNRWA is staffed by Palestinians who are obviously sympathetic to Hamas and to their own situation. And that's understandable. I'm not criticizing them for that, but I think it's important to take these statements, with a grain of salt, and understand that there is a sympathy there that is understandable. And the suffering that they are going through and the lack of humanitarian aid is a result of years and years of Hamas abusing the international community's goodwill, stealing this aid, and appropriating it for their own terroristic, genocidal intentions. So we must take... Yes.
No, please, I'm sorry.
No, we have to take steps to ensure that this aid is not used for nefarious purposes. And that's the reality. And by the way, I can add one more thing. We also have over 200 hostages in Hamas hands. So not only are Palestinians suffering, we understand also our people are hungry and thirsty, and they also need this humanitarian aid. We want it to get in. We want to make sure that it doesn't go into the wrong hands.
In fact, that was my next question. 200 of Israelis are kept hostage. That's bad, and I'm sure Israelis are angry. There is no question about it. And one doesn't need to justify why you're angry. But the point is, see, somewhere along the line, when you have leaflets distributed in Gaza Strip asking people to evacuate, 1.2 million people to evacuate within 24 hours. Now, this has happened. Now, things of this sort is what one questions.
Well, first of all, they weren't given 24 hours notice. I believe it's almost a week later, and we still haven't sent ground troops in. So they've had plenty of notice. A lot more notice than our citizens had before they were slaughtered. And if I could just touch on one other thing that you mentioned, our goal right now in Gaza is not revenge. Of course, that we have a lot of rage, a lot of passion, and that is a feeling that is shared among many Israelis. That is not the military's goal. The military's goal is to make sure this doesn't happen again. So this is not a revenge war. This is a war of survival.
So then, Yoni, does Israel believe that Palestinian equals Hamas?
This is a complicated question because the Palestinian people in 2006 voted for Hamas in democratic elections. In 2005, after 38 years of occupation, from the same war in 1967 at the West Bank, the reason that the West Bank is still occupied legally by the military, the IDF, the Israeli government, decided to pull out every last soldier, every last settlement in 2005. In 2006, the Palestinian people held elections in both the West Bank and in Gaza, and they elected Hamas. Now, it wasn't an outright, they didn't win a total 100% of the vote. It was a democratic election, and that means that they won a majority. It was close, and the Palestinian Authority, represented by the Fatah movement, came in second. But the conclusion is quite obvious that not all Palestinian people support Hamas, and I don't think we should equate the Palestinian people 100% with Hamas. But what we must realize is that a large portion of them, a majority of them, did vote for Hamas. They do support Hamas, and we see it in their actions to this day, where every time there is a terrorist attack, even as brutal, as savage as the one on October 7th, they take to the streets, they hand out candies, they have celebrations, and this is something that you simply don't see on the other side. Every single Palestinian that has died, you will never see Israelis out in the street celebrating, giving out candies. That's not who we are. We don't enjoy killing innocent Palestinians. For some reason, they enjoy killing innocent Israelis.
So why do such things now? Why not restrain? Why not show that level of sympathy, Yoni? That's the point I'm saying. Why be what Hamas is?
Right. Well, first of all, we're not. If we were what Hamas is, we would have flattened Gaza decades ago. We have enormous firepower. We have shown tremendous sympathy and understanding for the Palestinian people for many years, for decades. Again, this war could have ended a long time ago if we were anything like Hamas, but we're not. However, this time it's different. They have forced a war upon us that is not a war for land. It is a war for survival. If we don't eliminate Hamas, we will be next. And we understand that. We know that from their plans. We have found their plans that were on them, the Hamas terrorists that we did manage to kill on October 7th. We know what their plans were. They weren't planning to just stop at the south. They were planning to get to the center of the country and continue their massacre. So it's very unfortunate that what is going on and that Palestinian people are suffering, but it is a result of basically two things. The war that Hamas started on October 7th and the fact that they've embedded themselves within this civilian population. Now, thankfully, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in the northern strip have heeded our calls, and they've managed to get to the southern part. Even though Hamas made tremendous efforts to block them, they managed to get there. Now, there's a limit to what we can do. We have to eliminate Hamas. We have no other choice. And it's unfortunate, but lives on both sides are going to be lost. But that is the price that you pay for freedom and security.
One has seen from 1948 Israel as a country acknowledged by United Nations, and to now, Palestine has been shrinking.
No, it's absolutely not a fact. If anything, the Palestinian land has grown. I know that there's this meme that has gone around that shows the green land and how it's shrunk. That's not true. This was never an independent Palestinian state. It was ruled by the Ottoman Empire for hundreds of years until the British took over in World War I. Palestinians have never had autonomy in this land. The only time that they had autonomy is under Israeli rule. They're beginning with the 1993 Oslo Accords. They've slowly been able to expand control and rule over themselves in their territories. Now, of course, it's true. The IDF, Israel, controls the outer borders because we've been left with no choice. If we don't do that, if we don't stop the terrorists from arming themselves in order to do the kind of things that they did on October 7th, we have no other choice. But their autonomy has actually grown in this land, and they have more autonomy now than they've ever had before. They have full autonomy in Gaza. The Hamas has ruled Gaza since 2006. They've been able to do whatever they want. They could have taken all this international aid, all this cement, all this fuel, all this water, and they could have built more hospitals. They could have built schools. They could have built institutions. They chose to build terror tunnels. They chose to build rockets. They chose to do everything that is negative and destructive for their people and for our people. Whereas when we were given the chance to build a state, and my family has been here since as early as 1939, my grandparents fought in the 1948 war. We built universities, we built hospitals, we built institutions, and this is why today we are a strong, functioning democracy. The Palestinians have had every opportunity to do this, and some of them have, and some of them have not. And that is the situation that we are in today.
But one can't deny the fact that 1948, when the Israel land and the Arab land was divided, the map then and the map post 1973 and post 1978, Palestine has been shrinking, hasn't it?
Yeah, of course it can be denied. There was no Palestinian land before. There's a Palestinian people, but the land that you're talking about, if you look at the map from 1947 from the United Nations, when they voted Israel as a state, this land was supposed to be divided between Arabs and Jews, Palestinians and Israelis, and they chose not to accept that plan, the partition plan. They chose to launch a war with 7 Arab armies at the time in 1948 that attacked us, and we won that war, and war has consequences. Now, our land expanded in 1967 because, again, we were attacked by 5 Arab armies, and this was a war of self-defense, and sometimes you need to take land from the people that are attacking you in order to create a buffer zone to create safety and security for your citizens. We have not annexed the West Bank. We did not annex Gaza. We left Gaza in 2005. The Palestinian people have had many opportunities, and I hope they will have future opportunities to build their own institutions, to build their own land, and to have their own right to self-determination. There's a lot of misconceptions about what things were before and what they are now. I hope this helps to clear some of that up.
How do you see all of this ending? How do you see peace happening in the region, Yoni? It's so important for both the Palestinians and the Israeli and the Arab world and the world at large.
Well, even in these horrible days that we're experiencing, there are some glimmers of hope. First of all, within Israeli society, we are seeing a level of solidarity between Arab and Jewish citizens that we didn't see before. We have also seen in recent years more Arab states and that have joined and decided to make peace and normalize their relations with Israel, such as the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan. And we know that Saudi Arabia was very close to normalizing relations, which of course would be a huge positive thing for the entire region. And that is also the reason why Hamas decided to launch their savage attack on October 7th, because they knew that this would disrupt the normalization efforts being made by the United States to bring Israel and Saudi Arabia together. So I will never give up hope. I do believe there is hope for peace in the region, and I do believe that there is hope for peace between us and the Palestinians. We do have people that we can talk to within the Palestinian people. We don't always like them, but at least Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian Authority, they have shown a certain level of commitment to nonviolent means of attaining their right to self-determination. Our security forces work hand in hand with the Palestinian Preventive Security Forces in the West Bank in order to thwart terrorist attacks. This has saved many lives, many Israeli lives, many Palestinian lives. Peace is possible between Israelis and Palestinians. But in order for that to happen, you have to get rid of the bad actors. You have to get rid of Hamas, Islamic Jihad, people like this who don't want peace. We see how they treat their own people. They didn't even want their people to escape the northern strip in order to get to safety in the southern strip. So we have to get rid of people like this, create a safer environment for everyone, including Palestinians. Now, I don't know what the day after will look like. I'm not even sure our leaders have come to a final decision, because first we have to remove the threat. However, there have been proposals out there that sound somewhat reasonable. For instance, if the Palestinian Authority took back control in Gaza, that there's a fair chance that Gaza will be run like the West Bank, and then we can have more hope for peace. So it is possible, but you have to get rid of the people who don't want peace, the people who want death, the people who want to kill more than they want to live. And when that happens, we will be on the road to peace.
Yoni, my last question. You see, as an ordinary citizen, and at this part of the world, why this part of the world, almost every part of the world, as an ordinary citizen, we believe that there is this huge animosity between the Arabs and the Israelis. And the moment an Israeli sees an Arab or an Arab sees an Israeli, he goes for his gun and tries to shoot him down. Is that how it is? Normally, I'm not talking about current situation. Normally, is that how it is?
No, not at all. In fact, I live in Jaffa. Now, I don't know how much you know about Jaffa. It's a part of the Tel Aviv municipality. The full name is called Tel Aviv Jaffa. Jaffa is one of a number of mixed cities within Israel where Jews and Arabs live together in peace, Arab Muslims, Arab Christians. I rent my apartment from an Arab plastic surgeon who owns 3 apartments. I rent one of them. We have very good relations within this mixed city. Not in every mixed city. Sometimes when it's tense, things are tense. But of course, there's many misconceptions about what daily life is like in Israel. As I said earlier, 25% of our population is not Jewish. And we have thousands of Arab Israelis, both Muslims and Christians and Druze and Bedouin, who are not only productive citizens, they actually serve in the IDF. They serve in the Israeli Defense Forces, and they will be part of the troops going into Gaza to eliminate Hamas. So if the Arab world, if the Muslim world is anyone out there listening to this interview, please understand that is not the reality in Israel. On a day-to-day basis, we do get along. And that, for me, gives me hope that this situation in Israel, where I would even state that it's probably in the entire Middle East, if not the whole world, there is nowhere that Arabs and Jews get along better than within the borders of the state of Israel. What we need is for that to expand to the entire Middle East and the rest of the world.
Thank you so much. Yoni, thank you so much for talking to us. And thank you so much for being so candid. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on and giving me a chance to speak. I very much appreciate it.